talking about what freedom means and how it changed over the course of history in the U.S. According to the dictionary, freedom means to act, speak, and think freely. Freedom really means having access to clean water, food, sanitation, good health, and a quality education. Freedom is not being afraid to stand for what you believe in. It is being in control of yourself. Freedom is not being enslaved in any way. The definition of freedom has changed very much since the birth of this nation. Freedom has often been invoked to mobilize support for war. For example, the United States fought the Civil War to quote-unquote bring about a new birth of freedom, World War II for the Four Freedoms, and the Cold War was to defend the free world. The recently concluded war in Iraq was given the title Operation Iraqi Freedom. Americans' love of freedom has been represented by liberty poles, caps, and statues, and been acted out by burning stamps and draft cards, fleeing from slave members, and demonstrating the right to vote. The history of American freedom is full of debates, disagreements, and struggles, and the meaning of freedom has been constructed at all levels of society, not just in congressional debates, in public political treaties, but on plantations and picket lines, in parlors, and even in bedrooms. The definition started with the premise that freedom is an entitlement to all mankind. The early settlers of Great Britain's North American colonies brought with them the long-standing ideas about freedom, some of them quite unfamiliar today. To them, freedom was not a single idea, but a collection of distinct rights and privileges that depended on one's nationality and social status. Liberties meant formal specific privileges, such as self-government or the right to practice a particular trade, many of which are enjoyed by only a small segment of the population. Freedom did not mean the absence of authority or the right to do whatever one pleased. Far from it. One common conception understood freedom as a moral or spiritual condition. Freedom meant abandoning a life of sin to embrace the teachings of Christ, which was often called Christian liberty, which meant leading a moral life. It had no connection with the idea of religious toleration. Religious uniformity was thought to be essential to public order. The belief in freedom as the common heritage of all Englishmen was widely shared by the 18th century Americans. Resistance to British efforts to raise revenues in America began not as a demand for independence, but as defense in colonial eyes of the rights of the Englishmen. The Stamp Act Congress of 1765 condemned the principle of taxation without the representation by asserting that residents of the colonies were entitled to all inherent rights and liberties of subjects within the Kingdom of Great Britain. By the 1830s, the democratic system had emerged, based on popular control of local governments. American democracy was loud, sometimes violent, and largely excluded women, at least from the voting booth, could be in corporate immigrants from abroad and after the Civil War, former slaves. It engaged the energies of massive numbers of citizens, producing voter turnouts that reached 80% in some elections. The right to vote became an essential element of American freedom. Yet even as the suffrage expanded for white men, it retreated for others. New states did not allow black men to vote. In the older states, some groups lost the right to vote even as others gained it. Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. The cause of the Union became explicitly linked to the promise of freedom of the slaves. The proclamation also authorized for the first time the enrollment of black men in the Union Army. Initially paid less than white troops, the black soldiers mobilized to demand equal compensation, which Congress granted in 1864 and 1865. The rights of black men took precedence over those of women. Leaders of the women's suffrage movement assured Southern legislates that the 19th Amendment, added to the Constitution in 1920, would not affect laws disenfranchising blacks, male or female, through property or literacy tests and poll taxes. The definition closely associated itself with equality through history. In the aftermath of the terrorist attacks of 9/11, the language of freedom once again took center stage in the American public disclosure as an all-purpose explanation for both attack and the ensuing war against terrorism. Freedom itself is under attack, President George W. Bush announced in his speech to Congress on September 20th. Our antagonists, he went on, hate our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote and assemble and disagree with each other. As during the Cold War, the invocation of freedom proved a potent popular rallying cry. So in simple terms, freedom over the course of history has expanded in definition as well as who it applies to.